What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Other Side of the Firewall podcast. We talk about the latest and greatest of cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who've made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shannon Tynes.
What's up? What's up?
And Chris Abacon.
What's going on, everybody?
What's going on? So welcome to Wednesday's episode. So Monday and Tuesday are our topics. Wednesday discussion. Thursday's Ask a CISSP. I don't have any this week. So I'll definitely check out the last one I did with Dr. Jimmy J. Davies. Really cool interview. And then Friday's everything else. Movies, books, games, and all that cool stuff. But without further ado, I give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. So this article comes from darkreading.com, written by Ariel Waldman. And the title of this one is Docuseries Explores Mental, Physical Hardships of CISOs, right? So the name of this docuseries, this was crazy, right? It's called CISO, the worst job I ever wanted, right? And what they
sounds
did
so crazy to me, it's so crazy.
Yeah, I read that. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That's a pretty catchy title right there. But what it is they did interviews with several CISOs, and they go over the difficulties of being in that position, right? So like we've talked about it before about the CISO role and it being a part of the C-suite, but how they're almost always a scapegoat whenever something major goes down, right? And they kind of talk about it in this article where they reference how, yes, you are a part of the C-suite, but it seems like they get pigeonholed just into the technological aspect of it, and they don't have as much of a play as, your CFO, your CEO, COO when it comes to the C-suite. And like I said, they're almost always made the scapegoat, right? And they have some stories in here, and I'm interested to see this because it hasn't actually released yet. It's going to release later in the year, but they do mention some stuff that's going to show up in the documentary. And they talk about how there's this person that's a CISO, and they talk about how they're leaving their home, and when they left their house, they had a kid in the car, and they looked, and they had left their front door open, so they got out of the car to open their front door, but they didn't put the car in park, right? So it starts rolling back with the kid in the car. Just the mental fatigue they were going through to where things like that were happening. And I'm interested to see what the other things that are going on when they air this documentary of what's their mental strain is, right? And it's one of those things where people think, well, okay, well, they're getting overwhelmed, and it's just a mental aspect of it. No, that'll almost always play over into a physical role, right? Like you'll get physically sick when you start getting enough mental strain to where it's like, hey, this is what's going on. It almost always ties in together to where you'll have different physical ailments that'll come to fruition, right? But yeah, they go over the whole SolarWinds hack in 2020 and how the CISO became scapegoated for that, right? So yeah, it's a hard business to be in because they want to tell you you're part of the club, but you're not really in the club when the poop hits the fan, right? Like it's just kind of how it goes. But this is interesting, man. Like CISO, the title does kind of work out that way, right? Because I think CISO, when you're in the cybersecurity field and when you're in IT, like that's kind of what you want to get to, right? You're like, yeah, I want to be in that C-suite. Like, what do we talk about for the podcast, right? Like, talk about making it even and getting people up in that C-suite, right? But if you get there and this is how they treat you, this is what you do, or this is how they do you, it's not as desirable as you want it to be. So I hope it gets better for the CISOs that are out there, right? Like hopefully they have one, right? Because almost always when it comes to the CISOs, they're the ones that when it comes to money even, right? They're like, yeah, we don't have money for that, so we're not going to do it. So you want me to do this job that is so hard and becoming ever expanding, right? But you're not giving me the funding to make it happen. So that's kind of what they're going into, and I imagine in this documentary. But it's going to be an interesting watch. So when it does come out and release later in the year, I do want to see it. But Chris, what's your thoughts on it?
I think CISO, I think we've seen examples in our careers, even in the military, where it's like, it's for those that aren't military listening in, we're always part of the six shop. It's six. I was an N6, I was in the Navy, or, did the Air Force use A6 or is it just S6 for you guys?
It was S, but Army I think is A, right? A is A?
No, I think it's also S in the Army.
Yes, S in the Army.
Yeah, so we're part of our respective six shops, right? Just as an example, when everything is going fine, right? Everything is working swimmingly. We didn't get any recognition, right? So, it's just them doing their job. The six shop, the N6, S6 shop is doing their thing. The moment something happens out of your control, if it's something involving a outdated patch, if it's like something, right? The ISP is down. Nothing you can do about it. It's your fault. It's Six's fault. And who's the first person to get blamed? The top at the S6. Usually the S6 commander or the director. Director. And in my experience, I've seen it on their faces, right? It's like they would come back from a meeting and they would come back just disgruntled. We've all seen our disgruntled comms officer just like, and then obviously it's just, I could see the toll on his face, right? When, something is down on not to the fault of it, but due to some type of infrastructure. Right. And it's really, when it comes down to it, cybersecurity, as we know, as cybersecurity professionals, it needs to be communicated organization wide, and it needs to be everyone's responsibility at some layer. And then when you think about it at the C-suite layer, who helps enable some of those cybersecurity initiatives? It's the C-suite. It's support from the top, from the CEO, from the CFO, from the COO. So if CISO is asking, hey, we need to start doing this, we need to start, for example, a classification scheme so that people don't send stuff to their Google Drive and stuff like that, even if it's unclassified, but there's control and classified information, et cetera, you don't want to start talking about that, right? But people sending stuff to their Google Drive from their regular, let's just say military accounts, NIPR accounts or something, that dangerous practices. So stuff like that, if data classifications cannot be pushed, right, in the C-suite's just like, you don't need to do that. You can handle that, right? You can handle that, CISO, but we're not going to support it, or we're not going to care about it. Well, how is that going to be implemented without top-down support, right? How is it, right? Without organizational support, without a cybersecurity risk policy that's signed by the CEO saying, this is how we run cybersecurity. If CISO says something, we need to really take it seriously. And unfortunately, it's I think the scapegoating of CISOs is just a lack of cybersecurity as a value driver for the organization. It's not just like I think what they call it in industry is it's called a cost center. It's just an expense. It doesn't bring in sales, right? But for us, we understand that we are a business enabler, right? So cybersecurity enables business. And I think that C-suites, as we're evolving, as these threats get crazier, they have to understand the threats out there. So I know like with CISOs, they get very flustered with some of the executives, right? It's just how it is sometimes because organizational culture, like legacy thinking, things like that. But I think modern large organizations have an understanding of specifically SEC requirements. If you're in the financial industry, it's everybody's responsibility, right? So those are my thoughts. But Ryan, what do you think?
No, I agree with everything you guys said. So as regulation becomes more of just a challenge, right? Like, so CISOs are going through a lot more liability and a lot more scrutiny as the SEC starts to dig a little bit deeper, as disclosures have to be, material incidents have to be disclosed much quicker. You have organizations such as in the US, you have insurers like Crum and Forrester now offer personal liability policies specifically designed for CISOs, filling a gap in traditional D&O coverage. So now you have CISO insurance coming out. You have the coalition of 45 global CISOs has urged the G7 and OECD to harmonize cybersecurity regulations to reduce liability burden and improve clarity. So you have international organizations trying to come down and say, hey, we need to kind of bridge this gap. We have too many varying regulations. We need like a standard so that way we can better protect ourselves.
Do we think that's what needs fixing though? So here's where the discussion part comes into it, right? Like, I think it's a matter of like, if you can prove that cause like when they have these meetings in the C-suite, there's a secretary and they're taking minutes, right? So that secretary that's in there taking minutes, like if you just say, okay, go back to the minutes when I told them I needed this, that, the third, the fourth, right, to properly protect us from whatever may have eventually got to them, right? The fact that you tried and then you were outvoted, that shouldn't be one of those things. I think that's where it is. I don't think it's a matter of we need more regulation to say you're more so looked after. They just need to be treated like more of the team. You know what I mean? Like,
I see what you're saying. But that's a business decision at the end of the day, right? Like, who are we going to dump this on?
But it shouldn't be the CISO that falls for it when they say, hey, I asked for this and this is why I asked for it. Exactly what happened, right, is because I did not have the funding to combat it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Collect those receipts. I don't know if that makes, because you have politics as well, right? Like, do you raise certain things in meetings in order to get them captured on record? And if you do so, does that then cause you to lose your position before it hits the fan? Like this CISO's too aggressive. We need to get rid of him or her.
But if that is the case, then the CEO, CFO, COO, they need to be the ones to take responsibility when something does happen because you're not properly staffed, you're not properly funded, right? So yeah, you can keep trying to get rid of them, but
or they find a more timid CISO to pull in to then dump it on them.
Part of that comes with, like, unfortunately, like, what the uncomfortable thing for CISOs is that they have to get into the business mindset, right? It's being able to drive and being able to communicate that a particular technology or policy is going to, one, protect our ROI and rather our revenue stream, right? Our pipelines or whatever you want to call it, right? So I think CISOs, coming from a technical background, going into that business-oriented environment where it's all about the numbers, all about the financials, I think that transition itself is very difficult for a lot of tech guys, even for guys like us that come from the network side of the house, right? Looking at it from a business perspective.
Why aren't there a lot of BISOs then? Like, I don't see that title being thrown around a lot. That would be that gap, bridger.
One thing interesting, right? So if you look at like the traditional, I would say IT auditor, right, from a Big Four consultant firm, they're usually CPAs, right? Because they're as in certified public accountants. So they're coming from finance, right? But then they're going into these IT auditor roles, and they usually it's a CPA or something like that, or CFA that becomes a CFO. They are less technical than a CISO that comes from, hey, I was part of a SOC for 10 years, right? They are those guys and gals, I would say, are more, not necessarily more equipped, but have probably more experience talking the numbers because of their, financial backgrounds. But they don't have the technical experience of a like CISO coming from our type of background. So I think the struggle for us as cybersecurity professionals is talking the business language. And I think once that bridge is gapped, I think you're going to get a more successful CISO C-suite relationship.
That's interesting because do you have both? So I know in larger organizations, right, they'll have a CISO and a BISO, but in smaller organizations, like you usually just have a CISO.
Yeah, it's usually just a CISO, or usually it's just like a chief technology officer that's dual-hatted. For some reason, that guy or gal has both infrastructure and security, right? So I would imagine that type of role is very stressful to have both of those on your.
Well, yeah, because the different pots of money as well as different ways you have to communicate it to the C-suite. So is it not to diminish the role even further, a CISO, but what would it be? Let's say that all these responsibilities get rolled up to the CIO of the corporation or the CTO or whomever. Like, just get rid of that position, and now these regulations are now tied directly to the C-suite. Or is that something that can't happen because, like, I know a lot of regulations are not too specific because they don't want to tell businesses how to run their business, but they just have enough teeth to say, if you don't do these things, we'll drop the hammer on you.
And yeah, go ahead, Chan.
I don't think you need to change anything. So to what we're talking to, you just need to have the CISO be able to talk to business speak, right? Tell them the money they will lose if this should happen. Like, that should get their attention, right? Like, okay, well, if you're down for 2 days because of this, that, and the third, this is the money you'll lose. That's usually when they spark up and they're like, okay, well, we can't have that. So let's go ahead and make it happen. And that's not usually how it happens. Like, a CISO is more than likely, and I can't say this, I'm not a CISO, right? They're more than likely going in there and saying, they're the nerds with the glasses saying, I need blah, 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 and this is why we do it, and blah, blah, blah. You got to be able to make it make sense, as in CENTS for them, right? You got to tie it to the money, and I think you'll get better results that way. I just don't think that's the way that they're going about doing it.
So is it a matter of the whomever is holding the purse strings having to give them a report of the money? Because I don't think that's shared with them. I think because they're cost center, right? So I don't think they share the profit and loss sheet and other things with the CISO. I think that's all capped at the C-suite.
But okay,
I don't know though.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. That could be. I would think they're in the know with that. I would think they're up there catching hell whenever something. If you're going to catch hell because something goes wrong, you want to know the money that's going into it. I would think, but maybe not. I don't know. They are treated like second-class citizens.
Yeah, do they even go to those meetings, right? Like they might just have, like, it might not be on their calendar. We should get one on. We should hit up a CISO. But then that person would have to be unencumbered, right? You can't come here.
Yeah.
with a role and complain about your boss.
They probably got all types of NDAs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
But yeah, we should try to hook that up because I think it's a very interesting topic, and I think it's a good warning for people early in their career. Like, this might not be the path you want to necessarily. It might not be the heights you want to get to, or might be the path you want to go down. Right? You might want to stay technical and not in harm's way, so to speak. But you want everybody to strive for those higher positions, right? Because what's the jump between CISO to CTO or CIO or whatever? Is its own distinct path, right? Like, is CISO for a very technical person like the end of the road, right? Because they can't make that jump to business. So that's all interesting questions. Like, you only see a certain amount of certifications for CISO, right? Like ISACA has one and things of that nature. I've seen a couple of degrees that have BISO and within their curriculum, so to speak. What are you gonna say, Chris?
I was just gonna say that's very interesting you say that, because literally I was on browsing LinkedIn yesterday, and one of the posts was like, you can't certify your way into the C-suite. I was like,
right.
Oh, man, I mean, it's true, right? Like, multiple choice question test shouldn't be an indicator of somebody's business and C-suite acumen, right? So because of the C-suite issues and risks are so nuanced, that I would say a CISO really has to be able to adjust to that type of vernacular and be able to speak the business language to be successful.
It's interesting.
You're not going to have a paper tiger CISO, right? It's not
exactly,
going to be somebody that just gets a bunch of certifications. It's like, look how good this does. Like, you have no real experience anywhere, right? Like, you're just going out here getting all the certs. You got the degree, whatever, but you haven't spent time here. You haven't spent time here. You haven't experienced anything.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. Like, you have to build that resume to get to that position. But then how do you get the experience to get to the next position? I wonder, like, how do you get into the C-suite from a CISO role? Or is that like few and far between, like maybe CISOs where you cap out at? Because you see in government, you see that jump, but government has a different pathways, different vernacular. And it's not necessarily, you don't care about profits, right? Because you're a service. You are a cost center in its entirety. Most of government roles do not generate money.
I've got an analogy for this, right? So let's just take officers, for example. So in the Navy, like, how many flag level positions are there for cyber and IT versus how many flag level positions are there for surface warfare ship and pilot officers? There's just a million more opportunities for this. For example, maybe a pilot in the Air Force, or whatever, to become a general versus
right. Pilots in the Air Force take
or
cyber commands.
Say again?
I said pilots in the Air Force can take over a cyber command.
Exactly, but it's not the other way around, right?
Right.
So I think that's that's a good analogy, right? Because the opportunities for a cybersecurity professional, let's just say, or even the 6 professionals, 0506, to become a star, I think are more difficult, because you have to take a specific command to be able to put on that star, right? So I think that's kind of a similar conundrum for CISOs, right? Do we cap out at the CISO level, or because you've got, I would argue we could become COOs, right? Based on,
you can start,
you can pivot into operations. But when it comes to like CEO or whatever, unless your product line is specifically in IT, right? I think it's like, for example, going into the finance industry as an IT guy and trying to become the CEO of an IT of like credit card company or whatever, finance, it's gonna be a tough pill to swallow. It's gonna be really hard.
Yeah, that's very true. That's interesting. Yeah, like there are no real direct pathways. It's more about who you know, where you've been, and what you did, and not necessarily in that particular order, right? Depending upon the company you're coming from,
for sure.
And then what backend do you have on that degree, right? Where did you graduate from? Who do you know? What's in your network? Yeah, there's a lot more gripping and grinning politics I think, to make that jump, as opposed to just a straight path where we're usually used to, right? Like, you learn some stuff, you get to the help desk, you learn some stuff, you get to the SOC, you learn some stuff, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting to think about. I never thought about the next jump from there, right? It's always been how do I get to the CISO role? But yeah, once you get there, how do I get to the next hurdle? Probably easier to start your own company.
Yeah, absolutely.
To gain that experience. But no, I think it's a great conversation. And I definitely want to come back to it. Like, I want to get somebody on who has that experience, who doesn't have,
preferably retired,
have to worry about blowback from it. But definitely continue to hit us up. We go by the other side of the firewall.com or ramcyber.io. You can find us pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts, but if you go to those two web pages, you can go directly to our links to get to those things, or listen to us right on the web page. Look out for the guide that's coming out. So the other side of the firewall has a guide that should drop in midsummer. I don't want to give a date yet, but soon as I get it into all of the pipelines, so you can buy it wherever books are sold. And then hit me up personally. I'm at RY Security Guy. That's RYRY Security Guy. You can find me pretty much everywhere, but LinkedIn is where I'm most responsive. Where can I find you, Chris?
You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Chris Abacon, last name spelled A-Bacon.
There it is. Stay safe. Stay secure.